Good morning, Year 6, and welcome to a new week's home learning, and welcome to your learning journey at work today. Today, or so far throughout our learning journey, we've been looking at imagery and descriptive writing, because at the end of this, we are going to write a descriptive setting. We're going to write just a page of descriptive writing about a setting, so in The Hobbit. So we're going to choose one place in The Hobbit and we're going to write a really vivid descriptive setting using all the figurative language, the senses, using our characters' feelings and thoughts. And today we've looked very much so far about our descriptive adventurous vocabulary and figurative language we can use, but we haven't thought about speech. So today we're going to be distinguishing between the language of speech and writing. And the first thing we need to do is think about how can we tell when a character is speaking? What do we need to remember when using direct speech? And that's what we're going to think about at the start of the lesson. So, who can think about some of the rules of speech? So have a quick think to yourself before I start pulling down our cover here, and have a quick think about what rules of speech you already know. Now you've had a quick think, let's have a look at the first one. Well, I can tell you all speech must be in speech marks. And as we can see here, all speech must be in speech marks, and we can see some examples of speech marks at the end here. So all our speech must go inside these speech marks. Rule number 2 is speech always starts with a capital letter. Like any sentence, it must always start with a capital letter. So please remember that speech always starts with a capital letter. Our third rule is if there is a new speaker, we must start a new line. So yeah, new speaker means we must start a new line. Our fourth rule is, let's have a quick look at our fourth rule. That is, at the end of speech, we must always have a comma, exclamation mark, or question mark. So yeah, at the end of speech, or when someone is speaking, at the end of when someone is speaking, we must always have a comma, exclamation mark, or question mark. And number 5 is we must have a reporting clause after speech. Okay, and that is often, said or shouted or whispered. So said Bilbo Baggins, shouted Gandalf, whispered Thorin Oakenshield. Those are all examples of reporting clauses because they are telling us who said it and how they said it. So then if I keep going and we go down to this piece of speech here, I'm just going to go through all the rules with you. Well, here is the first rule, and I'm going to underline this one in red. And here we can see some speech marks, can't we? Don't be a fool, Bilbo Baggins. And we can see that he's saying that, so that's in speech marks. He said to himself, thinking of dragons and all that outlandish nonsense at your age. So again, we can see the speech here is gone in speech marks. Our next rule, I'm just going to do a green pen here, but yes, speech always starts with a capital letter, and we can see that that capital letter is there. Our third rule, actually, we don't have a piece of, we don't have two speakers here, so no one started a new line, but we will just remember that when someone is speaking or someone new is speaking, then we must start a new line. Our fourth rule, there's always I'm going to underline this one in blue, and there's always a comma, exclamation mark, or question mark at the end of our speech. Well, here we can see they've used exclamation marks to signal the end of the speech. So don't be a fool, Bilbo Baggins, and there we go. We can see that exclamation mark at the end of the speech here. And then our final rule, and I'm going to do this one in purple, he said to himself. He's saying it, that's a reporting clause, because he's telling us that he said it to himself. So all speech must have a reporting clause. And we can see there that they've used, 4 of the 5 rules, and often, if it was a long period of speech, we probably would have seen the 5th rule as well, or the 3rd rule in this case here. So what I want you to do very quickly is, in your learning journey books, I want you to copy down those 5 rules of speech, or those 5 common rules we have to remember when using their speech. We don't actually have to remember the rules in this order, but I've just written it down like this. However, we must use all 5 of these rules when we're adding speech into our writing. So quickly pause the video and write down the rules of speech. now that you've written down the rules of speech, I just want you to have a quick think about how speech helps us advance a story or advance a setting. So here, what is also different about speech and what's a descriptive writing? What can the speech do here that the descriptive writing cannot? And in that, really what you need to think about is, how does speech represent the characters? Well, if you're thinking about it and you've thought, well, actually, speech helps portray the character's feelings. So here, Bilbo Baggins actually feels like a fool. He feels like a fool because he shouldn't be thinking about all this outlandish nonsense and quests and dragons at his age or as a hobbit. They don't do that sort of thing. So this portrays Bilbo thinking that he's just being silly and he needs to stop and he needs to change the way he's thinking. So actually this really helps portray Bilbo as a character, and that's what speech does. Sometimes when we write speech, we write way too much. No, said Bilbo. Yes, said Gandalf. No, said Bilbo. Okay, said Gandalf. And that sort of thing is quite boring. But where speech really helps our writing is it helps advance the story by telling us the character's feelings, by telling us how they would feel in certain situations, and by sharing and moving the story forwards. That's when we need to think about using speech. So here it's moving the story forwards because it sort of explains why he no longer is thinking about going on an adventure, and instead then he's just going to put on his apron, light fires, boil the water and wash up, and then he's going to have a nice breakfast and go back to his comfortable life rather than going on the adventure. However, we do know he doesn't do that, but this helps portray our character's feelings. And that's now what I want you to do. I want you to write some speech. I want you to write some speech using our 5 rules that you've written in your book. So you're going to write underneath your 5 rules in your learning journey book. And you're going to write a short piece of speech about how your characters would feel after they have entered Mirkwood. So what I want you to do is I want you to get up your positive piece of writing about Mirkwood that we did on Thursday. So we did that really positive piece of writing about our characters and about Mirkwood, didn't we? We turned Mirkwood from a really negative place into a positive, enchanting place. And now I want you just to write some speech underneath that piece of writing, or underneath your 5 rules of speech, about how your characters would feel after they entered Mirkwood. What might they say to each other? What might they see that they might share with one another? How might they feel in this really positive, wonderful place? And how might they act and what might they say because of that? So that's your task for today. And remember, when you're writing those speech, or this speech, don't forget to use the 5 rules. Good luck.